Hello friends! And welcome to my channel. My name is Jeanette and today I wanted to share with you one of my projects, which is The Lift! 9 Stories of Transformation. So this is an anthology put together by the Lift podcast, and I was lucky enough to be the artist for this entire book. So I did the cover art as well as illustrations on the inside. There's a lot of them. And I'm very excited to share an excerpt from this book with you today. It's not going to be a whole story, but it's going to be a nice taste of a story for you. So, along with the excerpt that I am reading for you today, I am going to share with you some of these drawings that I did for the illustrations inside of this book, and I'm excited to share that with you as well. So, relax, sit back, let's go for a ride. Today I am going to read an excerpt from the 9th story, which is Escape by K.B. Goddard. And this is the illustration that I did for that one. John Merriweather walked with slow steps homeward. It was a fine night. Stars shone bright and lustrous in a clear, cloudless sky. Not to be outdone, the full orb of the moon had ascended in its bright blue-white raiment to preside over the night sky. The air was sweet and fresh, the night warm. There came only the gentle sighing of the wind and the cry of a night bird as it brake upon the silence. Yet John walked on, oblivious to the charms of the evening. His mind was elsewhere. As an artist, such a night would have once invoked a sense of rapture and driven him to his sketchbook. Now, though, his thoughts lay in another direction. All week long he had suffered from disturbed sleep and uncomfortable dreams. His dreams, however, only grew from the occupations and fears of his waking mind. When he reached home, he hung up his hat behind the door and crossed to a chair, ignoring the unfinished work on the easel, half buried amid a confusion of paints and brushes, canvases, and paper. He dropped down into the chair and flung his head back. It could not go on like this. Really, it could not. He badly needed a distraction. He could not work, for his mind continually wandered back to his dilemma. He picked up the book he had been reading from the table next to his chair, where he had discarded it the night before, and set himself to try and read a few pages as a preliminary to bed. In this endeavor, he was not wholly unsuccessful. A while later, he closed his book and looked at the clock on the mantel. It was almost 11:15. He yawned and stretched himself out. His fatigued body was urging him towards bed. Tired though he was, he did not relish the notion of sleep, for sleep would only bring the return of the dreams that haunted him. The lonely silence of his rooms echoed within him. He sighed, lighted his candle, and put out the lamps. Passing between the shifting shadows thrown by his candle, he crossed the sitting room towards the door that communicated with his bedroom. The clock was chiming the hour as he laid his hand upon the doorknob. He froze for a moment. Surely that was a noise from within the room. Could someone have gained entry? Impossible. In any case, he had little enough that would reward a burglar's efforts. It was imagination only. He was tired and his senses were playing tricks on him. He threw wide the door and saw within the room nothing. Nothing, that is, save for his usual furnishings. He stepped into the room, and there was no one there. Of course there was not, and yet it was not the first time he'd had the feeling of not being alone in his rooms. Lately he'd more than once had the feeling he was being watched. He pushed the feeling aside as best he could, closed the door behind him, and went to bed. In his sleep, his features slipped into a progressively deeper frown. His face bore an oddly melancholic expression. The color rose in his cheeks, and his lips gave shape to a word that looked like Alice. Morning broke, the daylight bringing the slow, giddy relinquishment of sleep. John raised his head from the pillow, bleary-eyed and blinking. The sensation of being watched, which had been so insistent the night before, had somewhat abated. It was never strong during the hours of daylight. As the fog of sleep cleared, he became aware that the light was flickering. This made no sense. It was daylight now, and daylight did not... It was a moment before his mind cleared enough for him to realize where the flickering light was coming from. The door was open about an inch, and a red light was emanating through the gap. His first thought was one of confusion. He knew, closed the door before he went to bed. His second thought was one of concern. Was there a fire? He jumped from the bed and ran to the door. As he laid his hand on the panels, he observed that the door was not hot, neither was there a smell of smoke to indicate a fire. He stood resolutely for a moment. His brows creased. He was uncertain, and he did not like uncertainty. He pulled open the door and stepped through. It had been previously stated that the door to his bedroom communicated with the sitting room. It was, however, not his sitting room in which John found himself. It has been previously stated that the door to his bedroom communicated with the sitting room. It was not, however, his sitting room in which John found himself. Instead, he was now standing in what appeared to be the foyer of a large building. Perhaps a hotel? A layer of fine dust lay over the floor and the desk. Cobwebs created an intricate seal over the openings of the disused pigeonholes behind the desk. It appeared that no post had troubled their gossamer curtains for some time. The red light continued to flash somewhere overhead, but the source was not clear. He could see no gas jets or candles, nothing to account for the light. It was as though the air itself were flashing red, pulsing with fiery energy. From the gloom beyond there came a mechanical clunking and whirring. Barely did he have time to wonder what was happening to him before he was startled anew by the sudden sound of a disembodied voice coming out to him from the ether. "Emergency! Emergency! We've had an escape from floor 9. Please proceed to the lift." This was curious enough, but more curious was the fact that the voice seemed to be that of a child, a little girl. The voice came again. "Emergency! Please take the lift to floor 9. John Merriweather to floor 9. John froze. Whoever the voice belonged to, they knew who he was. Clearly he was expected, but just where was he? In front of him, a door slid open to reveal a lift. By some strange compulsion, he walked forward and peered inside. A moment later, he was sprawled on the floor of the lift as an unseen force pulled him into the interior. He scrambled to his feet and brushed himself off in as dignified a manner as he could manage in the circumstances. "Sorry," came the voice from beside him this time. He leapt back as he realized that a little girl with blonde curls was standing beside him. She was holding a music box and peeping up at him with an apologetic expression. How did she wasn't there a moment ago. Who? He managed to say. "Sorry," said the child again. "My name is Victoria Bigglesworth Hayes. I did not mean to startle you, but I need your help." My help? Where am I, anyway? "Usually this is a lost place. So many lost things are here, and I am one of them," she sighed, looking down at her boots. "But now I've misplaced one of those lost things, and I need your help to get it back. I'm quite new to this, you see." "Child, you talk in riddles. You're making no sense." "I'll do my best to explain everything in a moment." Then, as though she was speaking to the air, she suddenly called out, "Floor 9, please." The mechanical whirring came again as the lift creaked into life. John clung to the tarnished gilt walls of the lift in terror. "What is happening?" he cried. We're going to floor 9. "How did you—" "Probably best not to ask." She looked down at the music box in her hands and patted it fondly. "Do you like my music box?" she asked. He stared at her blankly. "Perhaps you'd like it to play you a tune. You seem a little discomposed," she said, tilting her head to the side and blinking up at him innocently. She pulled the crank on the side of the box. It began to play a soft, haunting melody that seemed to seep into his soul and soothe him. There might be a parade going by, in which case I will have to stop recording. Yep. It's parade time. I'm gonna have to pause. Okay, so, yeah, that was the 7 o'clock parade to thank healthcare workers, which I think is really cool. It doesn't happen every day, but I guess a bunch of people in the neighborhood decided to do it today, because it's a Friday and people have some time. So, to any healthcare workers who happen to watch this video, genuinely thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. She turned the crank on the side of the box. It began to play a soft, haunting melody that seemed to seep into his soul and soothe him. He found that he no longer questioned anything that was happening to him as strange, and he felt as though he were merely lost inside a daydream. There was a slight jolt as the lift stopped. The door slid back on its own, and he saw a gaslit corridor beyond. "Floor 9, declared the girl. "Follow me." He did so without question, trailing along behind like an obedient child. She walked along the passage until she came to a set of large double doors. These she pushed open and beckoned him inside. He found himself in a library of colossal proportions. Books everywhere, books as far as the eye could see. Before him was a table that had apparently been freshly laid for tea. "Do sit down," said Victoria. "I need to speak with you about something, and it might be difficult to explain. We have work to do, but you are clearly not in a state to go anywhere just yet. This place can be quite disorienting. I'm sure you will feel better after some tea." "It's breakfast time." "Is it? Time doesn't really matter much here." She shrugged. "I thought we would have tea in here. It's quite my favorite room. I love books. I love stories." "Do you?" asked John as she poured a cup of tea from a pink china teapot and handed it to him. "Oh yes," she replied. "Sandwich?" "Thank you," he said. "Yes, I love stories. Would you like me to tell you one?" "All right. But you mustn't interrupt," she said in a manner somewhat reminiscent of a nanny to her charge. "I promise," he replied meekly. "Once there was a little girl who found herself all alone in the world, without any mother or father. All alone in a lost place. Alone, that is, apart from the creatures that lived in the darkness. Sometimes visitors would come and see the girl when they needed to make a choice, and she would guide them on their way. Sometimes, if they made the wrong choice, they never left. But they didn't really find her. The lost place found them. Then, one day, something escaped from the lost place, and the girl needed the help of a brave hero to bring it back. And that is where you come in, Mr. Merriweather." "I?" "Yes, you. You see, the thing that has escaped is in your home." "I don't quite follow." "Have some more tea," she said, refilling his cup. "Cake?" She offered him a plate, and he picked up a slice of cake without ever stopping to think how peculiar all of this was. "Thank you." "The thing that escaped," she continued, "it belongs in this place. It was never meant for your world. Its powers will be far stronger outside of the confines of this place. There's too much to feed on out there." "What do you mean, feed on?" "The human mind." What was he to make of that? He didn't know who this strange child was, but she did not talk like any child he'd ever known. This was all too much for his comprehension. "Good heavens," he declared. "Are you suggesting that there's some wild creature in my rooms that eats brains?" "Ew, of course not." She wrinkled her nose in disgust and frowned for a moment as if in thought. "Though there might be one of those on the second floor," she said as she gazed absently into the distance. She shook her head. "No, I mean the mind, the thoughts, the personality, not the physical brain." "But what you're saying is fantastic. There are more things in heaven and earth. How am I to be rid of it?" "Well, that's rather awkward. You must defeat it." "I? Defeat it?" John had a vision of himself in bare-handed combat with some wild creature. It was not a favorable image. Yes, you see, it has attached itself to you, so you must be the one to defeat it. I? He asked again. But how? You must break the link between you. But if we're connected, should it not already be back here? He asked. Victoria shook her head. It won't come back voluntarily. Even if you can stay here long enough to weaken your link to it, it will just attach itself to someone else. The only way to defeat it is for you to conquer it. She rose suddenly. We must go now, before it gets any stronger. Come. She beckoned him to follow her. He put down his teacup and rose to go with her. As she led him out of the door and back towards the lift, he asked, If it does not need to be where I am, why is it still in my rooms? A fair question, she conceded. She quickened her pace slightly, and he found himself once more before the lift doors. It is in a strange world, and it has already found its prey. It will build its strength from you, and there is no telling what it might do. There came the sound of sliding metal as the lift doors opened. She stepped inside the lift, and he followed. He was utterly bewildered. He could only conclude that he was subject to a bizarre dream. As he did not show any signs of waking, it seemed to be the best course was to simply follow where his guide led him. If nothing else, he would come out of this with inspiration enough for several paintings. When the doors opened again, they stepped out into near total darkness. Though they could see each other perfectly well, they seemed to be surrounded by thick, swirling black fog, thicker than any pea soup, and it crawled about them with an oily slickness. What lay beyond the fog was impossible to see, yet there was an impression of movement, shadows, in the fog. Where are we? I wish you wouldn't keep doing this. It's so disconcerting. We're supposed to be in your rooms. This was not me. Oh, it must be doubt. Doubt? He asked, squinting through the fog. Victoria nodded. Yes, a distant cousin of the nightmare. Yes, she said, not wanting him to finish. And like the nightmare, they can also create dreams. Unlike the nightmare, they prey solely on the fear that comes from doubt. All those choices we struggle to make for fear of the outcome, the questioning of our own worth and ability, all the natural doubts of humanity used as a weapon against it. You have them here too, but the ones from the lost place are far more powerful. Once they get inside your mind, they turn every doubt you hold against you. Even the smallest anxiety will become intolerably painful. None of this makes sense. He broke off suddenly and assumed a listening position. Through the dense fog echoed the sound of footsteps. The steps drew nearer. Victoria and John drew closer together, and from the swirling vapors 2 figures emerged. And that, my dear friends, was the excerpt that I would like to share with you from The Lift, 9 Stories of Transformation, Volume 1. If you would like to find out how that story ends, I know, cliffhanger, I am mildly sorry, but if you've made it to the end of this video and you're enjoying that story, I guarantee you're going to enjoy all 9 stories that are inside of this volume. So in the description below you will find a bunch of things, the first of which is a link to this book, which is an affiliate link, so if you buy it there, thank you, because I'll also get a portion of that sale through the affiliate link sale. And you'll also find a link to the Lift podcast, which was the podcast that started this whole project. And I just want to say thank you to Dan Foytek and the Lift for allowing me to share a little excerpt of this book with you here today, along with the artwork clips that I just recently discovered. Oh hey, I screen recorded a bunch of this. Cool, I should probably make a video with it. And last but not least, I want to say thank you to Ace, who is editing this video. So thank you so much, Ace, and thank you guys for watching. If you like this video and you want to hear more story times and see more art, then make sure to like the video to let me know that you enjoyed this and would like to see more, and subscribe to my channel for more arty story goodness in the future. And until next time, I hope you have a creative day. Bye! I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to say. I said thank you to Dan. I said thank you for watching. I said thank you to you. And I promoted the book. I think that's it. I can't think of anything else I should be saying. Okay. That's all from me. Bye!